One of the most unfortunate parts of our modern era has been the politicization of our entertainment. Once upon a time, folks could gather around the TV, gather around the radio, go to sporting events, and they knew that they were going to an apolitical, neutral ground. Yeah, you might fuss and fight with your family about who they were going to vote for, but when it came time to celebrate your favorite sports team or enjoy your latest sitcom episode, well, that was about just America, or just about the Western nations, or just about, hey, let's have a good time. Well, Star Trek was exactly the same, but nowadays, things have gone just a little bit insane. Folks, welcome back to another wonderful video here on the WDW Pro channel. You say, Pro, why is it wonderful? Why do you speak so braggadociously? Well, it's wonderful because you're here with us. And we mean it. Truly, you are the electricity that drives it all. Today, we're going to be taking a listen into a conversation we recently had where we were chatting about the fact that Star Trek has gone from something that was treasured and joy and, well, blissful to so many people of so many different political beliefs. It was a unifying sort of show. It was something that people could gather around, and yes, sometimes it moved into certain areas that made people go, I don't know if I really believe that's going to happen in the future, but it was idealist. Today, though, that is marred. It seems to be marred by the fact that people of today, the young'uns, I suppose, the young fellas, the young gals out there, well, they have dystopian views of the future. They don't have, by and large, a positive outlook on where we're going. And that has led to a space odyssey that is less odyssey and more oddity.
One of the things about the Star Trek franchise that I think is really valuable is the original series only ran from 66 to 69. Then you had the animated episodes in 73 and 74. You had the first film in 79, then Star Trek 2 in 82, Star Trek 4 in 80 or 3 in 84, Star Trek 4 in 86, and the Next Generation started in 87. They added a counselor to the bridge of the Enterprise, showing that mental health had become something that we had been acutely aware of that we might not have been so aware of in the 60s. And then moving into the 90s, you had Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. So Star Trek as a franchise grew and evolved from 1966 to 2005. New characters, new situations, new stories. And then there was an odd decision when they decided to make the movies in 2009 to go back and retell the tales of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. So in 2009, there was this, well, we have to go back to basics, even though Star Trek had 30 years of growth and evolution. Rather than make a new Star Trek for the year 2009, they went back and they sort of tried to recreate the original 60s Star Trek for the modern age. But the thing is, you can't really do that because the characters of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy were born out of the Camelot spirit of the Kennedy White House and the idea of civil rights and all the things that were and the first steps we took to the moon. You know, they were born out of that era, the same era that caused Kubrick to make 2001. And to go back and reinvent something that is a product of the 60s, I think was wrongheaded, because they could have reinvented or evolved Star Trek and continued to give us something new. And they didn't do that. Discovery is a prequel. Strange New Worlds is a prequel. And so you've got these two shows that are incredibly reliant on this show from the 60s, as opposed to being an evolution of the Star Trek ethos, which Star Trek itself, over 25 seasons of modern Trek from 87 to 2005, did under Rick Berman's stewardship. 25 seasons and 18 years of modern Star Trek is where we had Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. Both hit and miss, and then the movies at the time. And now there's this effort. By the way, this is corporate think. It also speaks to where we are in terms of our business ethos, practices, whatever, that the corporations want to go back and say, okay, we have to do something. We understand, because all we really understand, people know Next Generation, but the pop culture zeitgeist sense memory, call it what you want, of Star Trek is Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It's Tribbles. It's the Gorn. It's that thing. And forever. So a corporation, that's all a corporation knows. Corporations don't tell stories. They own the stories that people want to tell, but they don't know how to tell story themselves. So, yep, we're going to go back and we're going to reinvent Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And they've done it now over and over again. If you look at, we have Zachary Quinto played Spock. Now you've got Ethan Peck playing Spock in both Discovery and Strange New Worlds. I mean, it's so weird to me that Star Trek is moribund. It's stuck in this sort of repeating causality loop of the 1960s. Where is the evolution of Star Trek for today? So what you're doing is let's go back to the way Star Trek was in 1960. We're going to tell episodic stories, and it's going to be, but yet they don't take it seriously.
It's because they have tried to turn what used to be a futuristic series that had constantly evolved, like you just made an excellent point there, Robert. And now they've tried to make it into a throwback, which doesn't work, right? You're going against what Star Trek has stood for 50 plus years now. Like the whole idea is that this is what we can aspire to be. This is our possible future. And I don't know if it was you or somebody else who made the point that Star Trek has never been so much science fiction as it's been, the idea of what could happen and is possible. It's extrapolated from our current times into this,
I like the phrase that LeVar Burton uses for science fiction, or he at least did in one interview, which I loved. He called it speculative fiction.
Yeah. I think maybe you even brought that up before, Robert, because that's maybe what I was thinking of too. Yeah, but yeah, so to me, it's like, instead of it being what it should be in this idea of we're beyond all this other crap, like it used to be, it's now a throwback to this old show. They're trying to still create a future from the 60s that doesn't exist anymore.
I think also, and I'm not the best expert in this area, but I think too, part of what we're witnessing is we're watching a generation of writers come up who they no longer have an optimistic view of the future, and so they don't know how to write an optimistic future out there.
That too, yes.
They also don't have an understanding of potential, because that's the other part of the themes of Star Trek, which is the human species has become aspirational and look at the possibilities of our potential if we just get our own, start talking to each other essentially.
Here's
and not dwell on the pettiness between ourselves.
Here's a good super chat from Jack White that's applicable. Jack White always is very generous. It's actually a two-parter. Robert, the mistake you are making, first of all, I disagree with the idea that Robert's making a mistake here, is that people making Trek are interested in entertaining people when it's clear they are not, because they believe everything is political, and that belief is also the reason that they will never be happy. I see a little bit of that personally before I let Robert have it, because it's clearly for him. That Stacey Abrams episode, I think, was a bit of a reach, but they did seem very proud of themselves.
It's freaking
she'll only ever be a representative in a fantasy, so
True.
No, she does not resonate with people. And the fact of the matter is that stories, by and large, are about opinions and conflict. And opinions and conflict is the definition of true politics. It's not party politics. It's not any of the current era politics. Politics in general is really just perspectives and the conflicts that come from them and the way they're explored. So yes, everything can be political. But if your political spectrum is so narrow, then yes, you're going to make bad stuff. Because you cannot just focus on one aspect of politics. You have to take into the broader aspect of things, that there are politics in family. There, father wants to do something with his son that the mother thinks, oh, that's too dangerous because he's not old enough. That's politics. It doesn't feel like politics because there's no one waving a flag of a political party behind them, but that's it. It's about compromise, relationships, understanding, growth. Those are the things that make stories really great. And unfortunately, we do have a larger generation of writers recently that don't understand those nuances.
Well, not only what Jack is talking about is the idea of taking the modern governmental issues of the day and taking just that very small scope and distilling that into entertainment, as opposed to this broader philosophical, political conflict that you're discussing. Tom, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, it's going off of Scripps' point, is like, and we've talked about this many a time, but like classic sci-fi and other films, genre entertainment has always known how to, you know, bring in some kind of political or social commentary, right? Trek has always been that way. Another example that I just watched the other day because it came out on 4K, and I'm sure Robert will know where I'm going with this. The movie Nightbreed. Is anybody familiar with this movie? It takes an allegory for something that was going on at the time and does a great job with doing it without even reminding you of that. And you're supposed to be able to look at it 10, 20 years down the road and go, oh, I see what they were doing now. It's not supposed to be so obvious at the time. Now, Robert, you've seen Nightbreed. You know exactly what I'm talking about and
I
what
do.
the allegories are for. And even more so now, you can look at it and go, oh, wow, I can see how that character's kind of like Fauci. I can see like how this character's like this kind of representation, how this kind of representation, and really how the whole story is basically an allegory for the way that the world was treating AIDS patients at the time.
Yep.
It's a very broad fantasy sci-fi look at this story, but if you like look at it now 20 years in the past, you're like, or 30 years actually in the past, you're like, oh, okay, I totally see what he was trying to say here. Go ahead,
Well,
Robert.
to go further, to go further than that, I would say that science fiction, fantasy, and horror as a genre has always delved into difficult societal and political issues, but it's done it in the guise of fantasy, so it's easier to digest for audiences. And certainly Rod Serling knew that when he was doing the Twilight Zone. I mean, he was getting away with murder because the network standards and practices would not let him do the kinds of stories he wanted to do unless they were set in the Twilight Zone. I mean, he was attacking racism. He was attacking the pettiness between neighbors. He was attacking all kinds of things in Twilight Zone and showing us a better way. But because they were allegorical, he was able to get away with it. And some of the things about Star Trek, I mean, they couldn't directly address the Vietnam War. So there's a second season episode called A Private Little War, where the Klingons are arming the village people and they're preying upon the hill people. And the Federation Kirk is put in the position of, well, do we arm the hill people to keep a balance of power? And McCoy's like, if you're doing that, you're condemning these people to decades of warfare. And so they're making huge political statements that were directly referring to our involvement in Vietnam and the way the Russians were arming the North Vietnamese. And except in the guise of a Star Trek show, you can get away with it. The thing was, the people that were writing these shows were far more educated about politics. They had read a lot more. They were men and women of letters that had lived through World War II and to a certain extent the Great Depression in Korea. The writers today have only ever watched Buffy. Sorry, I said it again. They've only watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and they look upon that as that there's a show that did representation. We have to be fair, it did representation in a much better way than we're getting from TV today. These polarized issues and the activism that happens is basically at a junior high school level. It's I want things to be the way I want them right now. And it's like there's no nuance, there's no understanding. I feel that political discourse in this country has become so dumbed down to be almost embarrassing. And I mean that on both sides.
Boys are better than girls, girls are better than boys. That's the playground argument we are watching played out.
We're right there. I used to consider myself a classical left-leaning liberal. No longer. The people that are going to come for me are the left. They're gonna chain me up. They're gonna put me.
They already have.
Yeah, I know. As long as I'm on put up on a clay wall and I get to be on Videodrome with Debbie Harry, you know, I'm okay. but I mean, it's no. We live in a supremely dumbed down culture. We are all navel gazing. We're all the stars of our own reality shows, our own TikTok streams, or whatever. And I'm guilty of that as well. But I mean, we need an educated, healthy population, and until we have that, that is the first line of defense for everything, and we don't have it. We need smart, educated people to solve our difficult problems. It's become so polarized and tribal, and the way people watch TV, people that like modern Star Trek are a tribe now. And if you criticize modern, the people that I'm treated online the worst by people that like modern Star Trek. and they take all of my criticism personally, and they come after me personally. Like, I don't sit there and attack people that like Star Trek. I attack the episodes, and I attack the writers who, like Henry Alonso Myers. I was kind of going after him, in a funny way on Twitter today, because he wrote that. He spent millions of dollars of the studio's money writing a really horrible episode about the Gorn that is nonsensical, that brings up scientific concepts that completely don't work. It shows a complete lack of understanding of stellar mechanics, even though they use them in the episode. But I'm like, that's not how it works, buddy. And so his obligation is to write a smart episode of science fiction. What they serve up is something that's monumentally brain dead, and they haven't done the basic research to back up their own plot points. So
Yes.
when somebody says we're going to do this and it's going to this is going to happen, and I'm like, that would never work, because you have no understanding about how something from an orbit would fall onto a planetary. You can't just drop something from orbit and have it land on something else. It doesn't work that way. But when somebody writes something like this, I'm like, you're so dumb that you didn't go onto Wikipedia and even Google something and spend
You can
10
even
minutes
use
of
AI
time.
to do that now.
You would think that a show like Star Trek would at least have one science consultant.
They
It's
say
sad when they used to.
Doesn't matter if you have a consultant if they don't listen to them.
Exactly. This is a franchise where they actually made a movie about encapsulating a whale in a ship and put more thought into it than they do anything else anymore. But the fandom thing, Robert, I think you're making a great point about. It's not just Star Trek though; it's across the
it's across
fandoms
everything
in general.
Yeah,
and Star Wars is another one to kind of lead us back into the Disney discussion, because that's another one. The Star Trek is the same way. All they got left now is the folks that you're talking about, and that is those who are I will eat it up no matter what it is, because it has Star Trek on it, or in the case of Disney, it's whatever Disney property, Marvel, Star Wars, what have you. We have the same problem in the TMNT community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's the same in many others.
All right, folks, we hope you had a wonderful time listening in on that conversation. If you did, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and click it, stick it to the algorithms. It's the notification bell. On this channel, don't know about the others, but on this channel, I guarantee you, we care about what you think. We covet your comments, so drop one down below. We read them, we often respond. And folks, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.